Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's How To Academy event. Joining us this evening is psychologist and neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. Lisa is a university distinguished professor at Northeastern University with appointments at the Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. She was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in Neuroscience in 2019 and is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. In tonight's live stream, Lisa will demystify the brain, sharing valuable insights into human nature while tackling some of the popular myths and misunderstandings we've been taught. There will be time for questions at the end, so please feel free to write them in the Q&A box on your screen. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody from sunny Boston, Massachusetts in the United States. It's my real pleasure to talk with you this evening about my new book, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, and walk you through some of the really fascinating aspects of that 3-pound blob of meat between your ears. I always love this part where I display for people my difficulties in spatial cognition. Okay, here we go. So thank you to the How To Academy for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. Our story today begins long ago when the world was ruled by creatures who didn't have brains. Across the expanse of evolutionary time and with the innovation that comes from the trial and error and deaths of trillions of animals, you ended up with one of the most fascinating objects that evolution has ever created, a 3-pound blob between your ears that makes you human. But how did this happen? And what does our brain's evolutionary story tell us about human nature? That's going to be our adventure for this evening. We're going to begin our story about 550 million years or so, give or take, in a part of the Earth's evolutionary history called the Ediacaran, when the world was ruled by creatures like this one. This is an Amphioxus. It's about 5 centimeters long. An Amphioxus has no head, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no heart, no lungs, and no brain. And in 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, I call it a stomach on a stick. If you were a little Amphioxus, you would plant yourself in the seafloor like a blade of grass and basically just wait for little creatures to drift into your mouth. You wouldn't be able to see anything or hear anything or taste anything. And when the food supply ran low, you would pick yourself up and propel yourself to some other spot randomly, which would be more likely to have food. If we fast forward some millions of years to the Cambrian period, we find creatures became able to sense the presence of other creatures and deliberately eat them. This is hunting, when hunting emerged on the evolutionary scene. And it transformed animals into predators and prey and launched an evolutionary arms race so that animals evolved the capacity to move better and to sense at greater distances. Bodies got bigger and new internal systems evolved to shuttle nutrients and waste, allowing animals to become much more powerful swimmers and accordingly much more successful predators. With the arrival of greater senses, the most critical question in existence became, is this blob at a distance good to eat, or is it going to eat me? This became a question of movement. Should you move towards something or away from it? And movement is always a question of value because movement requires energy, which is a limited resource. The right movement might get you a big reward, or it might allow you to avoid something threatening. The wrong movement can waste energy that you might need later. So energy efficiency, that is getting good value for the resources that you spend, the glucose, oxygen, and so on that you spend, is a key to survival. And you can think about energy efficiency like a budget. A financial budget tracks money as it's earned and spent. A budget for your body tracks resources like water, salt, and glucose as you gain and lose them. Each action that spends resources, like swimming, is like a withdrawal from your account. Each action that replenishes your resources, like eating or sleeping, you can think of as deposits. And this is a way of thinking about how a brain regulates a body. It's a very simplified explanation, but it captures the key ideas that running a body requires biological resources. Creatures before the Cambrian period had just a handful of body budgeting cells to control their bodies. But as hunting drove animals to evolve bigger bodies with more systems to maintain, body budgeting required a much more sophisticated command center, which we call a brain. Now, your command center is pretty miraculous, actually. Right now, as you listen to these words, your brain is supervising a tremendous number of organs and systems in your body. This biological symphony is running nonstop for your entire life. And unless something is wrong with your brain or with your body, you are largely unaware that this is occurring. So your brain's most important job is not thinking. It's not feeling. It's not even seeing or hearing or tasting or smelling. Your brain's most important job is running a little worm body that became very, very complicated. And everything that your brain thinks and feels and imagines and sees does this in the service of regulating the systems of your body. Now, you and I don't experience our every thought, every feeling of happiness or anger or awe, every hug we give or every kindness we extend or every insult we bear as a deposit or a withdrawal in a metabolic budget, but that is actually what's happening under the hood. And what is the best way to run a body budget? Well, the answer is by anticipation or prediction. The core task of all brains is to regulate the organism's internal milieu, that means the systems of your body, by anticipating the needs of the body and preparing to meet those needs before they arise. The fancy name for body budgeting is called allostasis, but we'll probably just stick with body budgeting as the metaphor. Now, why is prediction a better way to run a body budget? Well, the best way to keep a financial budget solvent, as you may know from personal experience, is to avoid surprises, to anticipate your financial needs before they arise and make sure you have the resources to meet them. So if there's a big expenditure that you need to make, you'll save up for it before you make it. The same is also true with running a body. When it comes to body budgeting, prediction really beats reaction for many different reasons, not the least of which is it's much more metabolically efficient. All brains on this planet predict the needs of their bodies and attempt to meet those needs before they arise. So an example would be, if your body's going to stand you up, it's going to raise your blood pressure as you stand in order for the oxygen to get to your head so that you don't fall and break a limb or injure yourself, which would be very metabolically expensive. All brains work by prediction. So typically predictions are unconscious, but we can witness them in play with spatial examples. And let me show you what I mean. This example right here has been specifically designed to help you understand, to give you sort of an intuition for how prediction might work. So if you look at the image right now, billions of neurons in your brain are trying to make sense of this visual information. Your brain is searching through a lifetime of past experiences, issuing thousands of guesses at once, weighing probabilities, trying to answer the question, what is this most like? Not what is this, but what is this most like? And it's all happening in the blink of an eye. Now, if you still see black and white blobs on the screen, then your brain hasn't found a good match, and you are in a state called experiential blindness. And now I'm going to cure you of your blindness. I'm going to do that again, just to give you the experience of it. So now many of you will see a bee. Why? Because when your brain searches through past experiences, there's new knowledge there from the color photograph that you just saw a moment ago. And that knowledge changes how you experience these blobs right now. Your brain is constructing the image of a bee, even though there actually is no bee present. What you're experiencing is a combination of what's on the screen and what's in your head. And we have a name for this in science. We call it a hallucination. Some people call it a controlled hallucination. This is the kind of hallucination that doesn't get you screaming, running to the hospital, but it's the kind of hallucination that is business as usual for your brain, because in fact, every experience and action in your whole life is caused by some combination of what's inside your head, your brain's predictions, and what's outside your head. That is what's going on around you in the world and in your own body. To understand how this works, we have to take your brain's perspective for a moment. From your brain's perspective for your entire life, your brain has been trapped in a dark, silent box called your skull. Your brain is always receiving information from your senses about the world, about what's going on around you, from light waves and chemicals and changes in air pressure and so on. This information is what scientists call sense data, and it's inherently ambiguous. It can have many different causes, and your brain doesn't have access to the causes. It only knows the outcomes. So suppose you hear a loud bang. What caused it? And what should you do about it? Might it be lightning, for example? Might it be fireworks, for example? Might the loud bang have been caused by a car backfiring or a gunshot? Similarly, your brain is always receiving sense data from your body. And in the same way, your brain also has to make sense of those signals from your body. So for example, imagine that you're feeling tightness in your chest that's making it really hard for you to breathe. What does it mean? What caused it? And what should you do about it? Might it be that you're nervous? Could it be that you're having indigestion? Is it possible that this is the beginnings of a heart attack? In every waking moment of your life, your brain has to figure out the causes of sense data when it only senses the outcomes. This is what scientists and philosophers call a reverse inference problem. And your brain solves this problem by using past experiences to guess the meaning of the sense data coming from your body and from the world. This is what your brain is doing all the time, automatically and effortlessly. It is using your memory. It's reconstructing bits and pieces of past experience, assembling them into bits of memory, inferring the meaning of sense data, and guessing what caused those sense data and therefore what to do about it. Now, when I say your brain is remembering, you don't have any conscious experience of memory. Basically, your brain is just reconstructing, re-implementing, changing the firing of its own neurons to re-implement events from the past in order to predict the future. And this is the operating principle of the brain. And it's an important operating principle because your life might depend on it. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Actually, you just have to think about the last time that you drank, that you were thirsty and you drank a glass of water. Within seconds of draining the last drop, you probably felt less thirsty. The interesting thing is that water actually takes about 20 minutes to make it into your bloodstream from your stomach. So how did you quench your thirst 20 minutes earlier than you had the information about changing the osmolarity of your blood? And the answer is prediction. As your brain plans and executes the actions that allow you to drink and swallow, it simultaneously anticipates the sensory consequences of gulping water, causing you to feel less thirsty long before the water has any effect on your blood. Your brain knows from past experience that drinking water leads to quenching your thirst, but your brain doesn't have to wait. So it predicts, that is, it starts to change the firing of its own neurons to construct the experience of quenching your thirst rather than waiting to react to the events in your body. To give you a little bit of an intuition of how this works, I want you to take a look at this little image. I'll wager that you've never actually seen electrical towers playing jump rope before in real life. But you can understand that that's what's happening in this image because your brain was able to combine bits and pieces of past experience to make sense of a completely novel image. So unlike the blobby image that you saw before, where you were experientially blind, here, your brain was able, if you can see this as jumping a jump rope being played by electrical towers, then your brain can draw on past experience in this really novel way, so that you can see something that you've never seen before and understand it. The illusion also demonstrates the way that your brain predicts. So if we just sit silently for a second, some of you can probably hear the towers as they hit the ground. And some of you can probably feel the thudding in your chest. And if you can, that's because your brain is changing the firing of its own neurons in the absence of sensory input. And what I mean by that is the only thing that's here is visual. There's nothing, there's no sound, and there's no touch. But this is what brains do when they make a prediction. When your brain assembles past experience to make sense of incoming sense data, in this case it's visual, it's predicting what you will hear and what you will feel. So when I say prediction, that your brain predicts, I don't mean that it's an abstract thought that your brain is constructing. And what I'm saying is that your brain actually on a regular basis changes the firing of its own neurons to anticipate light waves and chemicals and other sense data before they hit your brain. And the same is true for the moment-to-moment changes in your body. Your brain prepares to receive them before the sense data actually arrives from your organs and your hormones and other various bodily systems. So your brain is constantly talking to itself from one moment to the next, starting at birth until the moment that you die. And those conversations are predictions about what you are going to do next, and as a consequence, what you will see and hear and think and feel. Now, predictions don't come out of nowhere. Your brain assembles them from bits and pieces of past experience that you yourself have experienced, but also things that you've heard about or read about or watched. If you could magically reach back in time and change your past, then your brain would predict differently today, and you might act differently and experience the world differently as a result. In fact, you might be a different person.